Lyra Velshan first saw the human at a trade negotiation on Galactic Concord Station, and she did not think much of him at all. He was smaller than most species in the room, with soft skin and no natural armor or weapons that she could see. His name was Commander Marcus Cole, and he represented Earth in matters of minor commerce and border disputes. The Sci-Fi Dominion had sent Lyra because the matter was unimportant, and she was young and needed experience. She watched Marcus move through the crowded chamber with quiet confidence, greeting ambassadors and merchants with equal warmth. Her species could read bioelectric fields, which meant she could sense the emotions of every creature in the room. The Kreth delegates burned with barely contained aggression. The Varathi observers hummed with ancient boredom. The Nethalar traders crackled with greed and ambition. But Marcus Cole was different. His field was calm and deep, water that had no bottom. She could not read him at all, and this fascinated her more than she wanted to admit. Over the following months, Lyra encountered Marcus at many diplomatic functions across the station. He always remembered her name and asked about her work with genuine interest. He laughed easily at jokes and listened carefully when others spoke. She noticed that he never raised his voice, never made threats, and never seemed afraid. One evening, a Kreth warlord named Vrathgor grew angry during a territorial discussion. He stood from his seat and drew a ceremonial blade, demanding that the humans withdraw their claim to a worthless asteroid field. The room fell silent as guards moved forward. But Marcus simply looked at Vrathgor. He did not speak or move or reach for any weapon. He just looked at him with those calm brown eyes. Vrathgor sat down. The blade returned to its sheath, and the discussion continued. As if nothing had happened. Lyra felt something shift in her chest that night, something she did not have words for yet. She began seeking Marcus out at events, telling herself it was professional curiosity. They talked about art and music, and the strange beauty of different worlds. He told her about Earth, a planet of violent storms, and predator-filled forests, and a sun that burned the skin. She told him about the crystal caves of Cytheri Prime, and the songs her people sang to greet each sunrise. Somewhere between the stories and the laughter, Lyra realized she had fallen in love. The proposal came on a balcony, overlooking the nebula that wrapped around the station like a purple ribbon. Marcus held her hand and asked if she would share her life with him. She said yes before he finished the question. The reaction from her people was immediate and harsh. A Cytheri ambassador bonding with a human was considered scandalous at best, treasonous at worst. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, with barely 5 centuries of space travel behind them. They held no great empire and commanded no vast fleets. They controlled no critical resources and threatened no established powers. Many in the Dominion saw them as insignificant, clever animals who had stumbled into the stars by accident. Lyra ignored the whispers and the warnings. She knew what she felt, and she knew what she saw in Marcus. He was kind without being weak. He was strong without being cruel. He was everything she had been taught a male could not be. The wedding was small and held on the station, with guests from a dozen species filling the chamber. Lyra wore the traditional silver scales of a Cytheri bride. Marcus wore a simple black suit that made his eyes look even deeper than usual. They exchanged vows in 3 languages, and when they kissed, the room erupted in applause. Night. As they prepared to retire to their quarters, Lyra noticed something strange. Her datapad had filled with messages while they celebrated. Congratulations poured in from ambassadors and dignitaries across 17 species. But 3 messages stood apart from the rest. They came from the oldest and most powerful empires in the galaxy, the Varathi hegemony, the Endless Collective, and the Dominion of Shadows. These were civilizations that had ruled the stars for tens of thousands of years. They had seen species rise and fall like waves on a cosmic shore. and they had not sent congratulations. They had sent condolences. Lyra read the messages 3 times, certain she had misunderstood. The Varathi matriarch wrote that she hoped Lyra would find peace in her choice. The collective expressed sympathy for the burden she had accepted. The Shadow Lords simply said they would pray for her. Condolences, as if she had suffered a loss rather than gained a husband. She showed the messages to Marcus, expecting him to be confused or offended. Instead, he read them with a small, sad smile and set the datapad aside. "Old empires have long memories," he said quietly. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means they remember things that younger species have forgotten." "What things?" He took her hands in his and kissed her forehead gently. "Nothing you need to worry about tonight." She wanted to press him further, but the warmth of his touch and the kindness in his eyes made her hesitate. There would be time for questions later. They had a whole life ahead of them. As she drifted to sleep in his arms, Lyra thought about the messages again. Why would ancient empires pity her for marrying a human? Humans were harmless. Humans were weak. Humans were nobody. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps everyone was wrong. Perhaps there was a reason why no empire had ever declared war on Earth. She pushed the thought away and let sleep take her. But in the darkness of her dreams, she saw something that made no sense. Vast fleets burning in the void, ancient cities crumbling to dust, and a species she did not recognize screaming as they vanished from existence. And through it all, she heard a voice that sounded almost human, saying words that chilled her soul. "We remember. We always remember." Lyra woke with a gasp as the station's artificial sun began its morning cycle. Marcus slept peacefully beside her, his face soft and innocent in the golden light. She studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of the darkness she had glimpsed in her dream. There was nothing. He was just a man, kind and gentle and utterly ordinary. She kissed his cheek and rose to begin her new life as his wife. Questions could wait. The truth could wait. She did not know that the truth was already waiting for her, patient and terrible and older than the stars themselves. Marcus retired from active diplomacy 3 months after the wedding, and they moved to Earth. Lyra had studied human homeworlds in her training, but nothing prepared her for the reality of the place. The sky changed colors throughout the day, shifting from orange to blue to purple as the sun moved overhead. Storms rolled across the mountains, with thunder that shook the ground and lightning that split ancient trees in half. Predators roamed the forests, bears and wolves and mountain lions with teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. The sun itself was a threat, bombarding the surface with radiation that could burn unprotected skin within hours. When Lyra expressed concern about these dangers, Marcus only laughed. "This is Montana," he said with a warm smile, "one of the calmest places on the planet." She did not find this reassuring. Their home was a simple structure of wood and stone nestled in a valley between 2 peaks. Called it a cabin, though it was larger than most Sci-Fi dwellings. He taught her to fish in the cold mountain streams and to identify edible plants in the forest. She taught him the meditation songs of her people and the art of reading bioelectric fields. They were happy, but happiness could not silence the questions that grew louder in her mind with each passing month. It started at a galactic summit on Varathi Prime. Lyra attended as a guest rather than a diplomat, standing beside Marcus as he greeted old colleagues. She noticed immediately that something was wrong with the way other species treated him. The Varathi were an ancient race who viewed younger civilizations with barely concealed contempt. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 40,000 years and considered themselves superior to all others. Yet when Marcus walked past the Varathi matriarch, a being over 3,000 years old, She bowed her head. Much. Just a small incline that lasted less than a second. But Lyra saw it, and she knew what it meant. Varathi did not bow to anyone. Other incidents followed. At a reception, a group of endless collective delegates stopped their conversation when Marcus approached. They greeted him with respect that bordered on reverence, before excusing themselves quickly. An ambassador from the Dominion of Shadows, a species known for their arrogance and cruelty, actually stepped aside to let Marcus pass through a doorway first. These were small moments, easy to dismiss individually, but together they formed a pattern that Lyra could not ignore. She began researching in the station archives during the journey home. She searched for anything related to humanity, to Earth, to the Sol system. Most of what she found was ordinary: trade records, diplomatic agreements, cultural exchanges. Data. Files that required clearance she did not possess. References to something called the Soul Accords that led nowhere. And most disturbing of all, redacted documents in her own government's archives that predated first contact with humanity. This made no sense. The Seferi Dominion had encountered humans only 4 centuries ago. How could there be classified files about them from before that meeting? She asked Marcus about the Soul Accords one evening as they sat by the fire in their cabin. His expression flickered for just a moment, too fast for most beings to notice, but Lyra's eyes were sharp. "Old agreements," he said casually. "Nothing that affects us now. Why can I not find any details about them? Some treaties are sealed for security reasons." "Whose security?" He looked at her then with something in his eyes she had never seen before. A weight that seemed to press down on his shoulders like an invisible burden. "Everyone's," he said quietly. She wanted to push further, but he changed the subject with practiced ease. The days passed and became weeks, then months. Lyra adapted to life on Earth, learning to love its strange beauty despite its dangers. She made friends among the humans in the nearby town, who accepted her with surprising warmth. She learned to cook human food and grew fond of something called chocolate. But the questions never stopped, and neither did the strange moments. One night, she woke to find the bed empty beside her. She found Marcus standing at the window, staring up at the stars with an expression of profound sadness. His bioelectric field, usually so calm and unreadable, flickered with something that felt like grief. She had never sensed this from him before. "What troubles you?" she asked softly. He did not turn around. "Just thinking about old friends." "What friends?" "Knew before we met. People who are gone now." She moved to stand beside him and took his hand. "You carry something heavy inside you, Marcus. Something you have never shared with me." He was silent for a long moment. "All humans do," he finally said. "It is part of what we are." "What does that mean?" He turned to face her, and in the starlight his eyes looked older than any human eyes should look. "It means that our species learned something long ago, something we cannot forget no matter how much we might want to." "What did you learn?" He kissed her forehead and pulled her close. "Ask me again someday," he whispered, "when you are ready to hear the answer." She wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. There was love there, but also warning. Whatever truth he carried, he was trying to protect her from it. 3 days later, Lyra received an encrypted transmission that bypassed all normal channels. It came from her grandmother, Velshan the Elder, a retired spymaster who had served the Dominion for 2 centuries. The message was short and written in a family code that only blood relatives could read. "You married into the silence, child. May your ancestors forgive you. Do not ask what Earth has buried. Do not ask what humans remember. And whatever you do, never make him afraid for you." Lyra read the message a dozen times. The silence was a term she had never heard before. What Earth has buried suggested secrets hidden beneath the surface of the human homeworld. What humans remember implied a shared knowledge passed down through generations. And the final warning chilled her to the bone. Never make him afraid for you. What would happen if Marcus became afraid for her safety? What would a human do to protect someone they loved? She looked at her husband sleeping peacefully in their bed, his face soft and innocent in the moonlight. He looked so gentle, so harmless, so utterly human. But for the first time since their wedding, Lyra felt something she had never expected to feel in his presence. Fear. Not fear of him, fear of what he might become if the universe forced him to show what lay beneath that gentle surface. She deleted the message and crawled back into bed beside him. He stirred and wrapped an arm around her automatically, pulling her close, even in sleep. She lay there until morning, listening to his heartbeat and wondering what terrible truth could make ancient empires bow their heads, and retired spy masters send warnings across the stars. Whatever it was, she would learn it eventually. She only hoped she was strong enough to bear the weight when she did. The trip to Meridian Station was supposed to be simple. A mining consortium had discovered rare crystals in the outer territories, and the Sci-Fi Dominion wanted to establish trade agreements before other empires moved in. Lyra's expertise in commerce negotiations made her the obvious choice to represent her people. Marcus insisted on accompanying her, claiming he wanted to see the frontier regions. She suspected he simply did not want her traveling to such a dangerous area alone. Meridian Station sat at the edge of civilized space, a lawless hub where pirates and smugglers mixed with legitimate traders. The station masters maintained a fragile peace through bribes and threats, allowing all species to conduct business as long as they followed one simple rule: no violence in the market sectors. Lyra completed her negotiations within 2 days, securing favorable terms for the Dominion. She was preparing to leave when the alarms. The Vraxian Syndicate had arrived. Vraxians were feared throughout the galaxy as slavers and raiders who operated beyond the reach of any empire. Their ships surrounded the station within minutes, cutting off all escape routes. Armed soldiers poured through the docking bays, overwhelming the station's meager security forces. Lyra and Marcus were separated in the chaos. She was dragged to a holding cell with dozens of other captives, while he was taken somewhere else. The cell was cold and dark, filled with the terrified whimpers of beings from a dozen different species. Lyra forced herself to remain calm as she assessed the situation. The Vraxians would want ransom for valuable prisoners. As a Sci-Fi ambassador, she was certainly valuable. She would survive this, and so would Marcus. Humans were not worth much on the slave market, so they would likely release him once they realized he had no commercial value. Hours passed in the darkness. Then the lights flickered. Lyra felt something change in the bioelectric atmosphere of the station. It was subtle at first, like a cold wind brushing against her scales. Then it grew stronger. Fear. Raw, primal, overwhelming fear. It was not coming from the prisoners around her. It was coming from the Vraxians. She heard shouting in the corridors outside, followed by the sound of running feet. A guard burst into the cell block, his scales pale, and his eyes wide. "Release them," he screamed at the other guards. "Release them all now." "What is happening?" one guard demanded. "The human. They identified the human. He is registered." "Registered as what?" The first guard grabbed his companion by the shoulders and shook him. "As Cole, you fool. He is registered as Cole." The name meant nothing to Lyra, but the effect on the Vraxians was immediate. Every one guard in the room went still. Then they moved with desperate urgency, unlocking cells and herding prisoners toward the exits. Lyra was pushed through corridors filled with panicking pirates. She saw hardened killers abandoning their posts and running for escape pods. She saw officers arguing over communication devices, their voices shrill with terror. And everywhere she went, she heard the same name repeated like a curse. Cole. 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 She found Marcus waiting at the main docking bay. He stood alone in a pool of calm while chaos swirled around him. His clothes were rumpled, but he appeared unharmed. When he saw her, his face broke into a relieved smile. "Are you hurt?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "No, but what happened? What did you do?" "I did not do anything." "Then why are they releasing everyone?" He glanced around at the fleeing Vraxians with something that might have been a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Pity, because they made a mistake, and they realized it before it was too late. A Vraxian captain approached them, HFY, according to the insignia on his uniform. He was a massive creature covered in armored scales and battle scars. He looked like he could tear a human apart with his bare hands. But when he faced Marcus, his posture was that of a terrified child. "We did not know," HFY said, his voice trembling. "I swear on my ancestors, we did not know who you were." "I believe you," Marcus said calmly. "We will release everyone. We will pay reparations. We will dissolve the entire syndicate if necessary." "That will not be necessary." "Please," HFY begged. "Please just tell them we did not harm her. Tell them it was a mistake." "Tell who?" Lyra demanded, but neither male answered her. Marcus simply nodded once, and HFY scrambled away, as if death itself was chasing him. They returned to their ship in silence. As they departed, Lyra saw Vraxian vessels scattering in all directions, abandoning the station they had captured just hours before. One of the largest warships exploded, as its crew apparently attempted to jump to faster-than-light speed without proper calculations. They were so desperate to escape that they killed themselves trying. Lyra waited until they were safely in hyperspace before confronting her husband. "Explain," she said simply. Marcus sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "My family has a certain reputation in some circles." "What kind of reputation makes pirate captains beg for mercy?" "The kind that comes from history." "What history?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I will tell you everything when we get home, I promise." That night, unable to sleep, Lyra accessed the public databases and searched for any information about the Vraxian incident. Most of it was classified, but she found one file that was partially declassified. It was a list. Species and factions were named on the left side. Dates were listed on the right. Next to each date was a single notation. The Kref expansion of 3044, extinct. The Mordran hegemony of 2877, extinct. The Velth consortium of 2156, extinct. The Elthori supremacy of approximately 10,000 BCE, extinct. Dozens more names, hundreds more dates, all followed by the same word, extinct. And every single entry had one thing in common. Each species had, at some point in their history, harmed human civilians. Lyra stared at the screen until the words blurred before her eyes. This could not be real. Humans were weak, humans were harmless, humans did not exterminate entire civilizations. But the evidence was there, cold and undeniable. She thought about gentle Marcus with his kind eyes and warm smile. She thought about the way ancient empires deferred to him. She thought about a pirate captain, a killer who had terrorized the frontier for decades, begging for mercy at the mere mention of his family name. And she finally understood why no empire had ever declared war on Earth. It was not because humanity was insignificant. It was because every species that had ever tried was no longer around to tell the tale. They returned to Earth in silence. Lyra did not speak during the journey, and Marcus did not try to fill the quiet with meaningless conversation. He knew what was coming. When they landed at their cabin in Montana, Lyra finally turned to face him. "No more secrets," she said. "No more evasions or half-truths. I want to know everything. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his brown eyes filled with something that might have been sadness, or relief, or both. You deserve the truth, he said quietly. Come with me. They did not stay at the cabin. Instead, Marcus drove them south for hours, until they reached a mountain range that looked no different from any other. He stopped at a gate, guarded by humans in unmarked uniforms. They recognized him immediately and waved them through without questions. The road led deep into the mountains, through tunnels carved from solid rock. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground complex that stretched beyond what Lyra's eyes could see. This is Cheyenne Mountain, Marcus explained. Humans built it centuries ago to survive nuclear war, but its true purpose is much older. How can something be older than the building that contains it? Because the building was constructed to protect what was already here. He led her through corridors filled with technology she did not recognize. Some of it looked human, but other devices were clearly alien in origin. Scientists and soldiers moved through the halls, nodding respectfully at Marcus as he passed. They descended level after level, until they reached a chamber at the very heart of the mountain. The walls were covered with screens, displaying information in dozens of languages. In the center of the room stood a single pedestal, holding a crystal that pulsed with inner light. This is the archive, Marcus said. It contains the complete history of human contact with alien life. I thought first contact was only a few centuries ago. That is what we allow other species to believe. He touched the crystal, and the screens around them flickered to life. Images appeared, ancient images, impossibly old. Lyra saw a world she barely recognized as Earth, covered in thick forests and populated by massive creatures. 65 million years ago, the first aliens visited our world, Marcus began. They were explorers, mapping the galaxy, and they deemed Earth unsuitable for colonization. Their departure caused what humans call the dinosaur extinction. The images shifted to show primitive humans living in caves and hunting with stone tools. 12,000 years ago, another species arrived, the HFY supremacy. Lyra saw tall, elegant beings with silver skin and eyes that glowed like stars. They were beautiful, she whispered. They were monsters. The images changed again, and Lyra felt her stomach turn. She saw humans in chains, humans being experimented on, humans dying in vast numbers while the HFY watched with cold indifference. They ruled Earth for 2,000 years, Marcus continued, his voice flat and hard. They saw potential in us, intelligence, adaptability, endurance, and they decided to domesticate us like animals. Why did no one stop them? Who would have cared about a primitive species on a backwater planet? The images showed generation after generation of suffering. Humans lived and died at the pleasure of their masters, bred for obedience, and cold when they showed too much spirit. But they made a mistake, Marcus said. They assumed that breaking our bodies would break our will. The screens showed a human face, an old woman with fire in her eyes, despite the scars that covered her skin. Her name has been lost to time, but she was the first to organize resistance. She spent 50 years building a network of rebels across every continent. What could primitive humans do against an interstellar empire? Anything necessary. The uprising began with small acts of sabotage, poisoned food, damaged equipment, mysterious accidents that killed HFY overseers. It escalated into open warfare that lasted 400 years. 400 years? Lyra could not comprehend such a conflict. The HFY were immortal and technologically superior, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender no matter the cost. We lost billions of people. Entire generations were born and died knowing nothing but war. But we did not stop. The images showed humans adapting, learning, stealing HFY technology, and turning it against their masters. By the end, We had reverse-engineered their weapons, their ships, their medical technology, and we used all of it to hunt them down. Hunt them down? The HFY had colonies across 1,000 star systems, Marcus said. When the last of them fled Earth, we followed. The screens showed human ships, crude by modern standards, but armed with stolen alien weapons, spreading across the galaxy. We did not want territory or resources. We wanted justice. You wanted revenge. Yes, Marcus admitted without shame. We wanted them to understand what they had done. We wanted them to feel the fear they had made us feel. The final images showed HFY cities burning, HFY fleets scattered, HFY survivors begging for mercy that never came. It took us 3,000 years to find every last one of them, and when we did, he stopped. When you did what? Lyra pressed. We erased them from existence, not just killed them, erased them, their worlds, their histories, their genetic records, everything. By the time we were finished, the only proof that the HFY supremacy ever existed was our own memories. At her husband, seeing him truly for the first time. This gentle man who fished in mountain streams and laughed at her jokes was a descendant of beings who had exterminated an entire civilization out of pure rage. The galaxy noticed, Marcus continued. Other empires watched us hunt the HFY, and they learned something important. What? That humans do not conquer. We do not seek power or territory. We simply exist. But if anyone harms us, if anyone threatens our people, he turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw the echo of 12,000 years of pain. We will not stop until there is nothing left to threaten us ever again. The Sol Accords, Lyra whispered, understanding at last. A promise the galaxy made to itself. They leave us alone, and we remain peaceful. Everyone gets to live. And if someone breaks the promise? Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we remember, and we do what we have always done. Lyra thought about the list she had found. All those extinct species, all those dates. How many, she asked, since the HFY? 37 species have tested the Accords over the past 10,000 years. And all of them made the same mistake. All of them learned the same lesson, and now they are all just names on a list that most of the galaxy has never seen. Lyra sat in silence as the weight of this truth settled over her. She had married into a species that had looked upon gods and chosen to destroy them rather than kneel. She had bound herself to a people who carried an infinite patience that concealed an infinite wrath. And strangest of all, she found that she was not afraid. She was proud. Show me the rest, she said. Show me everything. Marcus looked at her with surprise, and then with something deeper. Gratitude, perhaps, or love. Are you sure? I am your wife. Your history is now my history. I want to understand. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. Then let me show you what humanity really is. 5 years passed after the revelation in Cheyenne Mountain. Lyra settled into her new understanding of the universe with a peace that surprised even herself. She still loved Marcus, perhaps more than before, now that she knew what lay beneath his gentle exterior. He was not a monster, far more complex. A guardian of terrible memories, a keeper of ancient wounds, a reminder that even the kindest souls could harbor darkness when pushed too far. They lived quietly in Montana, growing old together in a way that Lyra had never expected to find happiness in. She had given up her diplomatic career to be with him, and she did not regret the choice. Then the news came from the frontier. The Nethalar dominants had attacked a human colony world. The Nethalar were a young, aggressive empire from the far rim of the galaxy. They had expanded rapidly over the past century, conquering weaker species and absorbing their territory. They had not been present during the HFY War. They had not witnessed the extinction of the 37 species who had tested humanity's patience. They had heard the warnings, but dismissed them as propaganda. Surely no species as small and scattered as humanity could pose a real threat to a growing empire. The colony they attacked was called New Haven, a farming settlement of 10,000 humans who had never seen war. The Nethalar fleet arrived without warning and bombarded the planet from orbit. When the fires died down, not a single human remained alive. Lyra watched Marcus receive the news. His face did not change, but she felt his bioelectric field shift in ways she had never sensed before. It was like watching a calm sea suddenly freeze solid. "I need to go to the Concord," he said quietly. "I thought you retired from diplomacy." "This is not diplomacy." The emergency summit was held on Galactic Concord Station, where Lyra had first met Marcus all those years ago. Representatives from every major empire attended, drawn by morbid curiosity and genuine fear. Everyone knew what had happened at New Haven. Everyone wondered what humanity would do in response. Lyra stood beside Marcus in the great chamber as the human delegation addressed the assembly. They were calm and polite. They expressed grief for the lost colony and requested that the Concord formally acknowledge the unprovoked attack. They made no demands. They issued no threats. The Nethalar ambassador, a tall reptilian creature named Vrexthan, laughed openly at their restraint. "Your species bleeds easily," he mocked. "Perhaps you should accept that some empires are simply stronger than others." The human representative did not respond. Instead, Marcus rose from his seat. The chamber fell silent. 3,000 years ago, Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, there was an empire called the Vreth Ascendancy. They ruled 200 star systems and commanded a fleet of 50,000 warships. They made a similar error to yours. "And what happened to them?" Vrexthan asked with a sneer. "They lasted 11 years after harming human civilians." The sneer faded slightly. "There were more of them than there are of you," Marcus added. He sat back down. Vrexthan opened his mouth to respond, but one of his aides rushed into the chamber clutching a datapad. The ambassador's scales went white as he read the message. Across the room, other delegates received similar notifications. The galaxy had already begun to move. Human operatives had been in position for centuries, sleeper agents embedded in every major civilization. Within hours of the New Haven attack, Nethalar supply chains began experiencing catastrophic failures. Silent as merchant captains refused to enter Nethalar space. Allied species received quiet communications suggesting that neutrality would be in their best interest. And from the darkness between stars came reports of ships, not warships but something worse. Hunters, small fast vessels that appeared without warning and vanished without trace. Nethalar military officers began disappearing from their posts. Scientists working on weapons programs never arrived at their labs. Politicians who had voted for the New Haven attack died in accidents that defied statistical probability. The Nethalar tried to fight back, but there was nothing to fight. No fleets to engage, no territory to defend, no enemy to negotiate with. Just a steady, quiet pressure that grew stronger with each passing day. Within 3 months, the Nethalar economy had collapsed. Within 6 months, their military was in disarray. Within 8 months, the dominants surrendered unconditionally. The leadership caste responsible for ordering the New Haven attack was handed over to human custody. Lyra never learned what happened to them. No one did. The trials were held in secret, and the sentences were carried out in silence. One day Vrexthan and his generals simply ceased to exist, erased as thoroughly as the Aelthori had been erased millennia ago. When it was over, Lyra sat with Marcus on the balcony of their cabin, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Do you regret what your species is?" she asked. "What you are capable of?" He was quiet for a long time. "Every day," he finally said. "We did not choose to become this, but we learned something terrible in those 2,000 years of chains. Mercy is a privilege only the safe can afford, and until the universe proves it will let us live in peace. He looked at her, and she saw both the gentle diplomat she had fallen in love with, and the unfathomable darkness that lay beneath. We will remain what our masters made us, the monsters that even monsters fear. Lyra took his hand and held it tight. She understood now that humans were not predators. They were something far more dangerous, survivors. Every human carried the genetic memory of slavery, of loss, of a rage so vast it could extinguish stars. And Marcus, her gentle, patient, kind Marcus, was the ambassador of that rage, the proof that humans could be more than their trauma. The promise that if the galaxy was kind, humanity would be kind in return. Then I will stay with you, she said. Someone needs to remind you what kindness looks like. For the first time since the news of New Haven, Marcus smiled, truly smiled, and the ancient weight in his eyes lifted just a little. That is why I married you. She leaned her head against his shoulder and watched the stars appear one by one in the night. Darkening sky. Somewhere out there, empires that had watched humanity with nervous respect breathed a little easier. The humans had a Scythereye among them now, a bridge, a reminder that they were still capable of love. And deep in the archives, beneath Cheyenne Mountain, the lists remained, patient and waiting and eternally vigilant, just in case.